Welcome to my channel. Right now, I would like to talk with you about 3 things about losing your spouse. The stuff you might not even think about. And first, welcome to my channel. My name's Kimberly. And yes, I've lost my spouse. I became widowed. And so this is a topic I know all too well right now. And I have been widowed for over a year. But if you're watching this, you have probably recently became widowed or have become widowed at some point. You know, this can happen if you're young or old. This can be male or female. You know, there's husbands out there that loses their wives. Same way with wife losing her husband. Of course, I'm going to describe to you my point of view. And this really goes for most anybody as well on most of these points. So first I would like to discuss, it's like this, guys, the initial first of the loss. And this can happen one or two ways. My situation, my husband died suddenly. He had a cardiac arrest and he passed away immediately right in front of me. I didn't have time. He said, my chest hurts, went like that, and fell straight down. I didn't even have time to reply back to him, even though I was right there next to him, right in front of him when it happened. That's how quick it was and how quick it can happen. So when you have a spouse to die like that suddenly in front of you, there wasn't no prepping beforehand. There wasn't no preparation. That initial loss is nothing but a shock. I was in a devastational shock. And I'll tell y'all about that. And this is part of the grieving process as well. You know, some people, it's either one or two ways. Either usually they pass away, your spouse does instantly, which could be in a car wreck. Like my husband, he had a cardiac arrest. And, there's so many different ways out there that can happen. Some spouses have cancer. Maybe in the hospital quite a while, and it was coming. So you may have already had time to grieve about it before they even passed, because you knew it was coming. And I've heard other people, I've watched the videos myself, and I've heard other people even make a comment saying that they felt it a relief. Not as in they wanted their spouse, is in a relief like that they know their spouse isn't suffering no more. So sometimes it ain't, even though they said that it was still a shock, it was a relief as well, just to know they wouldn't suffer. But when my spouse died, it was a shock. And this is my story. When he had his cardiac arrest, like I said, they took him to the hospital. They worked on him for 45 minutes, and they said there was no response. I even gave my own spouse CPR trying to save him till the paramedics got there. When I got to the emergency room, it was me and several family members come there all at the same time. And as soon as we got there, they asked us to go to a private room. And at that point, honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I was still hopeful that maybe they got him, the paramedics or something got him, helped him. And he was going to eventually be okay, maybe be in the hospital for a few days. When they took us to the little room, actually my main support person was a lady that worked at the registration desk. She knew me. And she came over there, and she was right beside my side when the doctor looked over at us and said, "I'm sorry, there was nothing we could do. He's gone." And honestly, I don't remember nothing. I do remember that lady being there, and I remember the lady grabbing me and just holding me. The secretary of the hospital, she sat there and held on to me. I was told I sat and screamed. And it was just, it was a shock. And so when you lose your spouse, it is a huge shock. And your world, and this is the second part and leads into the second part of it. Your world is never like you ever knew it. It's never going to be the same again. And once this happened, the minute I left that hospital, my world was completely different. And, some people get left with children. Me and my spouse have one child, minor child. And I also have grown children, but we do have one child that's still minor. And so some women, are widowed with children. That's another thing. You got to find the way to tell your child. That was a very hard thing to do. To be able to leave the hospital. My child was back home with a relative. Where we was at. We was at a relative's house actually when it happened, and he was with them. So when I got back and had to tell him, that was hard. So I'm still in shock, and I was for several days. Again, it was Christmas Eve, so the next day for me was Christmas, and I'm like, this. It's my little doggy, but so I was still. I mean, for probably I would say almost a week, I was just like, what has happened? This can't be real. I don't know how you felt. Again, if you're watching this, chances are you've had or you recently had a spouse to pass away. And I do want to say real quick, if you had, I am so sorry for your loss. Trust me, this is something I can say. I have been down there before, and this is not an easy road to go down. This is very hard, and it has been hard. Emotionally, everything. It's been hard on us. But that's the reason I want to do a video like this, because I want to be able to others to know that has lost a spouse. You are not alone. Your grieving is not alone. How you feel is you're not alone. Because this is very, very hard. Now, once after, and I will say, a lot of the funeral, I remember some of it, but then there's some of it I don't remember at all. The parts about the funeral, I remember a few people coming, and the funeral home was full. I do remember that. But to tell you, some people that came, I don't even remember. I was in such shock. Mostly my mind was either on my little boy, who's a minor, or just what has happened. I mean, that was my initial, what in the world has just happened? It wasn't supposed to be like this. We were supposed to grow old together. I was 50 and he was 52. I am now 52. The age my husband was when he passed away. It's been, it was Christmas Eve of last year, so we had both had birthdays, so it's not been 2 years. It's just been a little over a year. But anyway, that shock was probably the worst. And I will tell you, grieving is so many emotions. And that's something else I would like to address. The emotions you have, you should not feel bad for what you feel. Grieving is a hard process. Trust me, I know. I went through every emotion in the book, I think. But first, let me tell you, and then we'll go on to emotions. First, at the funeral home, again, I don't remember a lot of it. I remember like riding to the funeral or to the graveyard. Our funeral home is a few miles from where the cemetery is. And so I do remember writing, but I don't remember much about it, if that makes sense. I just remember being in the vehicle. I rode with a relative and being in the vehicle. And again, mostly my mind was on my little boy. And, and then again, what has just happened. I mean, I was in complete devastational shock. I lost, for one, the love of my life. I lost, second, my spouse. So next, after the funeral, I do want to mention this right here. Again, what I was just saying a minute ago, grieving is so many separate things. In the beginning, I was shocked again. I didn't know what to think. My mind was just the first few nights, not just the first night, but the first few nights. I was just so sick in my stomach. Crying, of course, all night long, just couldn't even sleep hardly. I'd cry myself to sleep, but I did sleep. And I would just feel just sick. Just like I was just going to be very, very sick. I was in such, devastational shock. So, which again, I wasn't expecting my spouse to pass away. It was a sudden incident. And so it wasn't nothing prepared beforehand. It wasn't nothing even thought about. So, and then at one point, after all of that, I became even angry with my spouse. Why did you leave us? Type of anger. Why? Just why? It almost felt like I blamed him in a way. And, I found out that was a normal grief. We go through so many different emotions. And it's really hard when you start dealing with those type of emotions. But let me tell you this, my friends. If you're going through this process, please don't think that when you're going through these different emotions, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't want you to feel bad for being mad at your spouse. It's normal. Or for being upset, for just being angry in general. It's a hard thing to deal with. And I will let you know too, people are around more during the funerals. But after the funeral's over with and things start, what I guess other people would consider, okay, things is back to normal now. People stop coming around as much. And that's usually when you need people the most. Because when you first have that initial shock, and this is the way it was for me, when you first have that initial devastation that happened, you almost want to be a little bit more, or I did. I almost want to be a little bit more by myself due to the fact that, you don't know what to say around people. You don't know what to do around people. Even your own self, you don't know what to do around people. And I know people try to say comforting words and things, but for the loss of your spouse, there ain't no really words you can be said. It's, again, the best way I can say is devastation. Because your world just got completely turned upside down. But later, when you start feeling more comfortable, everything starts, you want to start talking, you want to be more open to people, because you don't have that person in your life no more, your spouse, to talk to, because that was your go-to person, chances are, to talk to. So after things start slowing down a little bit, after the funeral again and such on, and you're not so upset yourself, you might want to open up to people. That's usually, and in my life, that was when the people was gone. Most people didn't contact you and say, hey, how are you doing? Do you need a friend to talk to? Would you like to just come over and hang out a little bit? Adult friend. I'm not talking about, I haven't found a child. That's my child. So our children is our children, even if they're adult or minors. They're going through their own grief because they've lost either a parent or a step parent or whatever. So they're not going to be a good one to talk to. You need more of a friend at that moment. And that's usually when people start, okay, they're okay now. It's been a month or two or whatever. And that's usually when you need people the most. For me, that's what happened. People started going, just drifting away. There was not, when I needed somebody the most, there was people not there to talk to. So that's another thing to expect after losing your spouse. People's not going to stay there. In the beginning, yes, you'll get your food and things like that at the funeral home. They'll bring food for you, which that's nice. People come give their condolences and speak to you for a little bit at the funeral and a little after. But you're under shock. You really don't even feel like visiting with people. But when you start comprehending things, that's when you need people the most, and that's usually when they're not there. Or that's how it was for me, my friends. Another thing I would kind of like to speak on is, again, when that happened, your world completely changed. Mine did. For one, my spouse, and this may be your spouse too, whether it's, again, a husband or a wife that you have lost, part of the time, chances are that you may have lost an income. My spouse was our sole income at that time. And at that point, when my spouse died, I could not go out and get a job due to the fact that I have a chronic condition. And so anyway, when that happened at the moment, I did lose an income. And, a lot of times our spouses, our homes may have been in their names. I don't know your circumstances. You don't know mine. But so much when your spouse passes away, so much changes in your life. A lot of times, the people that's been friends with you don't even no longer come around because maybe there was more closer with your spouse, but after they passed, they just didn't come around. Not to even say hi or even check on you. And, it's a lot of things changes, not just financial. Financial is a big one though. You may have to downsize and move to a different home. Maybe y'all was still under a mortgage. That can go with some of the financial aspects of life. He may have been your only income. You may have lost both incomes. And when you're used to living in two incomes, again, maybe you couldn't even afford a house payment no longer, or where you lived and had to downsize. I mean, this really changes your world, whether it's financial or friends. Again, some friends don't even come around no longer due to the fact maybe they was closer to your spouse than they are to you. And that's unfortunate. Because if there was friends in, they should still be checking on you. You lost your spouse. And, when your world's completely rocked like that, it's hard. A lot of the same places me and my spouse, my husband loved Mexican food. I don't usually go to Mexican restaurants no more because I like Mexican food, don't get me wrong. Once in a while I'll still go. But it reminds me so much of him, I don't go. So that has changed. So the way you eat's changed. Where you used to maybe, if you was going to cook pork chops tonight, maybe you and him both was going to have one. Now it's just one. Your shopping changes. A lot of wives shop for their husbands, even clothes and things like that. So all of that has now changed too. So your life is completely changed, completely upside down. And that's another thing a lot of people don't realize that happens. We go through our grieving, grieving. We go through so many changes of our life being completely different after our spouse. And we also go through financial, changes. Whether it's a loss of income or, again, bills or whatever the situation of yours is. And, we got to find out situation about bank accounts and other things. Maybe your husband was or your other spouse was taking care of the bank accounts. I mean, there's so many other things that we don't think about. And I don't know about you, but I was not prepared for none of it. It was all a new process for me, including the grieving process, the the changes that was made in my life, and everything. It was such a big difference in my life. I would have never beforehand imagined so much has changed. So I just wanted to get on here and make this video because I wanted to know if you are grieving or if you have lost a spouse or if you have lost a spouse previously at some point. I want you to know you're not alone because I have been there, my friend, and this is not easy. And some things, the way you're feeling is not unusual at all. Again, like being mad, angry at your spouse, shock, there's some things you may find out that you didn't even know about your spouse. Nothing bad. It's just some things maybe you didn't even realize that you come to realize later. At one point, my spouse had mortgaged one of my vehicles, and I didn't even know it. Hey, it was in both of our names. So at that point, I had to go back and buy the title back. So, I mean, that was something I definitely didn't know about nor was expecting. I'm just giving an example, though. So I wanted you to know you're not alone. Grieving's hard. Losing your spouse is devastating. It's hard. So to know your emotions, the way you feel is, don't think they're unusual. Don't get upset about things you feel with the loss of your spouse. For a while there, I'm like, the different emotions I was feeling, I kind of felt bad about them till I learned I wasn't alone. And of course, there's grief counselors out there if you ever need to reach out to one of those for you or your children or anybody. So remember, if you do need help, there is grief counselors out there to help you or your children. through this tough and challenging situation that you may be going through. So anyway, I just wanted to get on here and talk about a little bit about, I've been there. Sadly, we belong now to a club none of us ever wanted to join. The club of losing a spouse. And it's hard, my friends, it's hard. But no, you're not alone. I want you to know that. And again, if you're watching this and you have lost a spouse, and chances are you have, if you're watching this, to know that I'm very sorry for your loss. I truly am, from the bottom of my heart. So anyway, again, I just wanted to get on here and make a video and to let you know you're not alone, and to let you know it's okay to go through these processes, of devastation, grief. Your life's going to change, to let you know that this is all normal things that's going to happen. So bless each and every one of you. Thank you for watching. And if you don't mind, check out my other videos on some other topics that you might find interesting. Some I'll leave in the description. Bye, everybody, and thank you for watching.